the quiet of the stable. The estate had grown unbearably silent since Isabel's passing. Ethan Caldwell had once found comfort in the steady rhythm of hooves, in the lone nickers of horses waiting for his hand. Now, even the animals seemed unsettled, mirroring his own unrest. They kicked at their stalls, paced in tight circles, or whinnied at shadows as though demanding the calm that had died with her. Ethan moved through the barn in silence, his boots heavy against the wood. Grief clung to him like damp air, slowing every gesture. He had spent months trying to regain control of the stables, but the horses recoiled from him, picking up on the tension that twisted inside his chest. He was a man who had lost not only his wife, but also the rhythm of his life. Isabel had been the heart of everything. Her laugh had carried through these beams. Her presence had softened the horses just as it had softened him. Without her, the walls seemed hollow. That morning, Margaret had insisted he hire help. His sister never hid her opinions, especially when they concerned his crumbling routines. "You can't manage both grief and this place alone," she had said. Ethan had not argued. He lacked the strength. And so Clara Bennett entered his world. She came quietly, carrying no grand introduction, just a steady step and a voice meant more for the animals than for him. She was younger than he expected, late 20s, maybe, her hair pulled back in a simple braid, her clothes plain, the kind that welcomed dirt and work without complaint. She did not look at him with pity, and that alone set her apart. The horses stilled when she approached. A mare that had been restless all morning lowered her head, pressing against Clara's palm as though recognizing an old friend. Clara murmured something too soft for Ethan to catch, and the animal shivers eased. It was the first moment of peace in months. Ethan stood in the doorway, arms folded, watching. "You've worked with horses before," he said, his tone more observation than question. Clara looked up, her gaze steady but gentle. "Since I was a child. They usually listen when you do." There was no arrogance in her answer, only quiet certainty. She returned her focus to the mare, brushing a hand down its neck, whispering again. Ethan could not decide whether the calm she spread belonged to the horse or to himself. As the hours passed, Clara worked with a patience that unsettled him. She asked for no guidance, only moved with instinct, as though she knew what each animal needed. Ethan had hired her for practical reasons, because Margaret insisted, but now, watching the stables transform under her hand, he felt something more dangerous than relief stirring within him. By late afternoon, the barn carried a different rhythm. The horses chewed their hay without fuss, tails swishing in unison, as though a storm had passed. Ethan found himself leaning against the doorframe, unwilling to break the fragile harmony. For the first time in months, the weight in his chest loosened, just slightly. Clara noticed him there. She wiped her hands on her trousers, offering a small smile. "They're good horses. Just grieving, maybe." The words caught him. Grieving. The horses, like him, carried a loss they could not name. His throat tightened, but he forced a reply. "They've missed Isabel. She had a way with them." Clara's expression softened, respectful of the name. She did not press with questions, nor did she offer empty condolences. Instead, she simply nodded, as if acknowledging both his wife's absence and his lingering devotion. That quiet understanding was sharper than any spoken sympathy. Margaret's voice interrupted from outside. "Ethan, you'll come in for supper." He straightened, brushing dust from his sleeves. In a moment, Clara bent to gather tools, her movements unhurried, unbothered by his sister's presence. Margaret appeared briefly in the doorway, her eyes narrowing as they flicked from Ethan to Clara. Protective as ever, Margaret left without comment, though her silence carried judgment. Ethan exhaled slowly once she was gone. Clara glanced at him, then back at her work. Neither spoke, yet something unspoken passed between them, an awareness that Margaret had seen more than she should. As dusk settled, Clara finished her tasks. She lingered by the last stall, resting her hand against the horse's neck, her eyes distant. "Grief doesn't leave quickly," she said at last, her voice low but certain. "But it softens if you let others carry some of it with you." Ethan froze at her words. He wanted to dismiss them, to remind her that grief was his alone, but something in her tone, gentle, steady, almost intimate, kept him silent. He had not asked for comfort, yet she offered it freely. When she stepped past him to leave, her sleeve brushed his arm, the faintest touch. Ethan's breath caught, not from the contact itself, but from the sudden, terrifying realization of how deeply he had felt it. He turned back to the horses, but the stable no longer felt like a place of only sorrow. Clara's presence had shifted something inside him, something fragile and dangerous. He did not name it, not yet. But as the lantern light flickered across the stalls, Ethan understood one thing with aching clarity. For the first time since Isabel's death, he was not entirely alone. Quiet conversations. The following days unfolded with a rhythm Ethan had not expected. Clara arrived early, her steps soft across the gravel, her presence almost too gentle for the heaviness of his estate. She worked without fuss, her braid brushing her shoulder as she carried feed, brushed coats, or murmured words only the horses seemed to hear. Ethan found himself drawn to those murmurs, snatches of calm that did not belong to grief but to living. She did not pry into his past, nor did she shy from silence. Instead, she worked beside him as though she had always belonged there, and in that wordless companionship, Ethan felt something unsettling, relief. One evening, as they closed the stable doors against the cool wind, Clara spoke. "Your mare, Brisa, she carries sadness like a weight on her back. She needs steady hands, not just strong ones." Ethan glanced at her, unsettled by how precisely she described what he himself felt. "Is that how you see it?" Clara met his gaze without hesitation. "Horses don't hide their grief. They let it show, and it passes through them. People, we try to bury it. That's why it lingers." Her words pressed against him in ways Margaret's cautions never did. Margaret demanded he be stronger. Clara simply named his weakness and left it uncondemned. Later, alone in the house, Ethan found himself replaying her voice, soft and steady, over the crackle of the fire. He thought of Isabel, her laughter, her warmth, but the memory no longer stood alone. Clara's presence threaded through it, confusing, dangerous. Clara, too, wrestled with unease. Each night, when she returned to the small cottage she shared with Daniel, her fiancé, she felt his absence more than his presence. Daniel was a blacksmith, his hands rough, his hours long. He spoke in short sentences about work, about coin, about plans that felt like duty rather than dreams. He loved her, she knew, but his love was shaped by labor and silence. She lay awake one night, staring at the ceiling, recalling how Ethan had listened when she spoke of grief, how he seemed to hear her in a way Daniel never had. Guilt pressed heavy in her chest, but alongside it came a pull she could not ignore. The next morning, Ethan found her by the paddock, watching Brisa graze. "You're early," he said. Clara smiled faintly. "The air is calmest at dawn. Horses breathe easier then." He stepped closer, folding his arms against the chill. For a moment, they simply stood side by side, the quiet between them companionable, not empty. Ethan felt the urge to say Isabel's name, to share the weight that pressed his lungs, but he stopped himself. It was not right to bring Clara into such intimacy. And yet, it was already happening. Margaret noticed. She cornered him that afternoon in the kitchen, her voice sharp. "That girl, she's here too often. Too close. Isabel's memory deserves better than this." Ethan stiffened. "She cares for the horses. That's all." Margaret's eyes narrowed. "And what about you? Do you care for her?" He had no answer, only silence, which was damning enough. Clara, unaware of the confrontation, continued her work in the stables, though she felt the change in the air. Ethan was quieter, his glances more guarded, yet when their hands brushed while passing a halter, his breath caught audibly. Neither spoke of it, but the moment lingered between them like smoke that refused to disperse. That evening, Clara lingered longer than usual. The last light painted the sky in muted gold, and Ethan found her by the fence, staring at the horizon. "You should go," he said gently, though the words came reluctantly. She turned, her expression unreadable. "Do you ever feel," she asked slowly, "that the grief isn't just yours? That it belongs to the place itself, and you're just caught inside it?" Ethan studied her. The question cut deep, as though she had named the exact prison he lived in. Every day, he admitted. Her eyes softened, and for a heartbeat, they stood in dangerous closeness. No words, just the weight of recognition. Ethan could almost imagine reaching for her hand, almost imagine what it would be like to let himself feel alive again. But before he could move, she stepped back, breaking the moment with a faint smile. "You should rest," she said quietly. "The horses will be fine tonight." She walked away, her figure fading into the twilight. Ethan stood rooted in place, his pulse unsteady. Clara had spoken little, but she had said enough. Enough to remind him that he was not only grieving, he was yearning. And yearning, he realized, was more dangerous than sorrow. The storm. Rain struck the roof in violent sheets, rattling the stable doors as though the sky itself demanded entry. The horses stamped restlessly in their stalls, their ears flicking back at each crack of thunder. Clara moved quickly between them, her hands steady, her voice a low murmur that cut through the chaos. She stroked manes, adjusted halters, whispered reassurance with a patience that seemed to draw calm from the storm itself. Ethan stood at the far end, lantern in hand, watching her work. His own attempts at soothing the animals had failed. Their agitation mirrored his inner unrest, but Clara's presence settled them as surely as sunlight. Even Brisa, wild-eyed and trembling, pressed her head into Clara's palm and stilled. "You shouldn't stay in this weather," Ethan called above the rain. "The road will flood." Clara glanced over her shoulder, strands of hair plastered against her face. "The horses are frightened. I can't leave them like this." Thunder rolled again, closer this time, and the barn shuddered. Ethan tightened his grip on the lantern. "Then you'll stay here. I won't have you risk the road." The words came out sharper than intended, more command than suggestion, but Clara did not protest. She only nodded, moving to the next stall with the same steady touch. Still, Ethan's chest tightened as he realized what he had just done, invited temptation to linger under his roof. Hours passed. The storm showed no mercy, and the lantern's glow carved out a fragile pocket of warmth in the shadows. When the last of the horses settled into uneasy calm, Clara leaned against a beam, breathless, her sleeves damp. Ethan offered her his coat, and after a moment's hesitation, she accepted. "Thank you," she murmured, drawing the fabric around her shoulders. It dwarfed her frame, carrying the faint scent of him, wood smoke, leather, and something older, something burdened. Ethan lowered himself onto a bale of hay opposite her. For a long time, they sat in silence, listening to the rain pound against the roof. It should have been enough, two weary souls sharing quiet, but silence, in its own way, drew them closer than words ever could. Finally, Clara spoke, her voice low. "Do you ever wonder if grief changes who we are? If we can't go back to the people we once were?" Ethan's gaze fixed on the floorboards. He thought of Isabel, her laughter echoing in memory, her absence echoing louder. "I don't wonder," he said slowly. "I know. I'm not the man I was. I don't know if I ever will be again." Clara's eyes softened, shimmering with something unspoken. "Maybe you're not meant to be. Maybe you're meant to be someone new." The words struck him with more force than the thunder outside. He lifted his gaze, meeting hers across the dim stable. She was not offering pity, nor empty consolation. She was offering understanding, and something beyond it, something dangerously close to longing. The air thickened. Ethan's hand tightened on his knee, his pulse unsteady. He wanted to look away, but her gaze held him, steady and unflinching. For months, he had lived in shadow, but in that moment, the lantern light seemed brighter, her presence more alive than anything he had felt in years. He rose before he realized he was moving, crossing the space between them in slow, deliberate steps. Clara straightened, her breath quickening, yet she did not retreat. The coat slipped from her shoulders, pooling at her feet. "Clara!" His voice broke on her name, torn between warning and plea. She shook her head, just once, a silent refusal of his hesitation. And then he kissed her. It was tentative at first, a brush of lips that might have ended quickly, might have been dismissed as a mistake. But Clara's hand rose to his chest, clutching the fabric of his shirt, and the kiss deepened, hungry, desperate, fueled by months of unspoken yearning. When at last they broke apart, the storm still raged, but the air between them was heavier than thunder. Clara's eyes shimmered with conflict, her breath unsteady. "This is wrong," she whispered, though her fingers still lingered against him. Ethan closed his eyes, the weight of her words sinking deep. "I know." Yet neither stepped away. The lantern flickered, shadows stretching across the stalls. Somewhere in the darkness, a horse shifted, as though bearing witness to their betrayal. Clara turned her face into his chest, her voice muffled but trembling. "I don't want to feel this, but I do." Ethan's arms tightened around her, guilt and desire warring in every heartbeat. He had sworn his love to Isabel, buried her with vows of fidelity. Yet here he stood, clinging to another. And still, he could not let go. The storm outside began to ease, but the storm within had only begun. Fractures. The storm had passed, but the air in the stables felt heavier than the night before. Clara moved through her tasks with careful precision, her hand steady though her heart was not. The memory of Ethan's lips, his arms, his voice whispering her name, each lingered like embers under her skin. Yet alongside the warmth came guilt, sharp and insistent, clawing at her with every step. She had not seen Daniel since that night. His forge had kept him late, he said, though his eyes had searched hers with quiet suspicion. Clara knew he sensed the distance between them, even if he could not yet name it. Ethan, too, carried the weight of their secret. He worked beside her, his gestures measured, his voice careful, as though any slip might reveal the truth to the world. But his glances betrayed him. When Clara laughed, however briefly, his gaze softened. When she brushed past him, he stiffened, as though the memory of their closeness still seared him. It was Margaret who first gave the silence a name. She cornered Ethan in the barn one afternoon, her expression sharp. "You've changed," she accused. "And so has she." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Clara is here to care for the horses. Nothing more." Margaret's eyes narrowed. "Do not insult me. I see it, the way you look at her. Isabel has barely been gone a year, and already you reach for another. Shame on you, Ethan." Her words cut deeper than she knew. Isabel's memory still lived in every corner of the house, every shadow of his heart. Yet here he was, betraying that memory with the warmth of another woman. He could not deny it. He could only stand in silence, Margaret's fury echoing the very guilt that consumed him. That evening, Clara found Daniel waiting by the paddock. His hands, blackened from the forge, clenched at his sides. His eyes, usually patient, burned with quiet anger. "Clara," he said, voice low, "tell me the truth. Has your heart wandered?" The question struck like a blow. Clara froze, her mouth dry, her pulse loud in her ears. She wanted to deny it, to shield him from the truth, but her silence spoke louder than words. Daniel's jaw hardened. "It's him, isn't it?" Tears stung her eyes. "Daniel, I never meant." He stepped back, shaking his head. "Never meant what? To betray me? To throw away everything we've built?" His voice cracked, a rare fracture in his usual strength. Clara reached for him, but he turned away, his back rigid. "You've chosen, Clara, even if you can't admit it." He walked off into the fading light, leaving her trembling, torn between the man who had promised her stability and the man who had awakened her heart. Later, in the barn, Ethan found her seated on a hay bale, her face buried in her hands. He knelt beside her, his hand hovering before daring to rest on her shoulder. "He knows," she whispered, her voice raw. Ethan closed his eyes. "Margaret knows, too. Perhaps it was always impossible to hide." Clara lifted her gaze, eyes red. "What have we done, Ethan? Was this love, or just grief grasping at whatever warmth it could find?" Her question pierced him. He had asked himself the same. Isabel's absence had hollowed him, and Clara's presence had filled that emptiness. But was it love, or only desperation? "I don't know," he admitted, his voice breaking. "All I know is that when you're here, The silence doesn't crush me. When you touch the horses, when you speak, Clara, you make me believe I can breathe again." Her lips trembled, caught between wanting to believe him and fearing the ruin their bond had brought. "And what of Daniel? What of Isabel? Can we carry their ghosts and still call this love?" The barn seemed to listen, the horses shifting quietly in their stalls. The lantern light cast them both in shadow, as though even the flame refused to bless their closeness. At last, Clara stood, wiping her face. "I can't stay, Ethan. Not like this. If I remain, I'll destroy more than I heal." He rose with her, desperation in his voice. "Clara, please." But she shook her head, stepping back, her figure blurred by tears and lamplight. "Your grief needed me, but your love belongs to someone who can't return it. And mine should not be yours to claim." She turned, leaving the barn, her steps fading into the night. Ethan remained where she had left him, his chest hollow, the scent of hay and rain heavy in the air. Brisa shifted in her stall, lowering her head as though sensing his despair. Ethan stroked her neck absently, his mind echoing with Clara's final words. The storm outside had passed, yet within him it raged still. And though he knew she was gone, he also knew her touch had altered him forever.